Live and ready to go when you are, Chair.
Right. Anyway, welcome again to the Local Government Reform and Advisory Committee. And for anybody who's watching on YouTube, just bear with us. If anything goes wrong, we'll endeavour to put it right, given enough time. And if not, we'll have to stop the meeting and start again another day. For the register, could we have a list of all those who are here? So we've got myself, I'm here, the committee manager. Got Ian Jelly, Councillor Ian Jelly.
I'm here, present.
Anne Ireson, committee administrator. Are you with us, Anne? She's on.
I haven't got a very good connection.
This is jumping around. Leslie Thurland, Councillor Thurland. These are moving around. Clark Mitchell.
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Lloyd Bundy.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Councillor Mick Scrimshaw.
Yes, Chair, I'm here and I can hear okay.
Thank you. Graham Salisbury, the Managing Director.
Yes, Chair.
Lisa Hyde, Executive Director.
Yes, Chair.
And Martin Hammond, Executive Director.
Yes, Chair.
Have I missed anybody?
Yes, Chair, you've missed me.
So I do beg your pardon, but the names are moving around on this. So that's Mark Rowley, Councillor Mark Rowley, who's here. Right. Without further ado, item agenda apologies. Have we any apologies? The minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 19th of June 2019. Can I approve them as a correct record and sign?
Yes, Chair.
That's unanimous.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. There are no items of urgency. And so I'm going to go on to the agenda. Item 5, Graham Salisbury is going to do a local government reform update presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, when this agenda went out, we had intended doing quite a reasonably lengthy presentation, but members will recall that this time last week, there was a presentation to all members of the Council by the Future Northants project team. So in many ways that did the presentation. So all I wanted to do for a short period of time tonight was just pick out 2 or 3 of those slides just to reaffirm with members some of the really important bits out of that. I know that all the slide deck that was used last Tuesday night was forwarded around all members for those that weren't present to have a look at. And I think at the back end of last week, the programme office also forwarded the link from the session that took place in Wellingborough. So it was a live recording of what happened in Wellingborough on the presentation, so that if members didn't manage to join last Tuesday, they can view that and see what happened in one of the presentations. So I didn't want to redo what was done in all those presentations, because obviously that's now been done. If you'll indulge me and just let me go through a couple of slides, which I think are probably the key ones on local government reform. So thank you, Callum. Just takes me on to the first one, which is the high-level timetable, which I know the programme office went through in quite a bit of detail last week. I think the key dates here are obviously 1st of April next year, which is what's been called vesting day, which in effect is the first day of the new authorities when they come into being. In the lead up to that, you'll see at the top of the slide, there's a slogan which says, "We are here." That kind of represents present day when the slides were put together. And you'll see on the left-hand side, about halfway down, there's some red writing, which say blueprint approvals. That's really quite important, because that's when members of the shadow authorities, the shadow exec, start to look at what the work that's initially been brought together on the blueprints for both the North and the West, Clearly what's of interest to us is the North Blueprint. And that in many ways will be a really important discussion. It won't sign and seal everything then, but it'll provide a good basis for the development of how the authorities start to develop from that point forward. About the same time, so in the next couple of weeks, there's also hopefully the recruitment and approval and appointment process of the permanent chief exec for the North Authority. So they will start to have an input into that process as well, in terms of starting to formulate sort of the high level management structure, which is obviously important in terms of how that goes. You'll also see on the slide as we move across to the right, something that I'm sure all members will be interested in. So May next year is the elections for the new authorities. So that obviously jumps out. There's a period of time between the 1st of April and early May when the new authorities are coming into existence. The existing local authorities, including Kettering Borough Council, will no longer exist. All the members that are currently in post will still exist as members of the shadow authority until election day and a few days afterwards in law. So that was just a few bits from the high level timetable. Callum, if you could take us to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of what's going on at the moment to formulate those blueprints, there's three kind of big strands of work. So on the left-hand side, there's the disaggregation of county council services. So that basically means how the current raft of county council services is either split between the west and the north, either properly, virtually, or through some sort of client relationship. And there might be different things on different services. So that's a really important piece of work. And given that the county council budget itself represents up to about 80% of the overall budget of the new authorities, clearly that is, in financial terms, a really, really important piece of work. The middle column is district and borough services. So instead of disaggregating those, we have to aggregate those up. So in the north, the 4 district and boroughs, we need to go through a process of aggregating our services. Doesn't all have to be in place for the 1st of April, but we need to be on a journey towards that and making sure that all the services do actually work and residents get the services that they need from the 1st of April. And on the far right, it's a bit more of a boring one, but nevertheless is equally important, is around the finance. So prior to the new authority coming into being on the 1st of April, the Shadow Council will have to debate and approve a budget and all the things that are associated with the budget so that the authority can operate in the 21-22 financial year. And that will all be driven by all those components and the blueprint that we talked about on the previous slide. If we go to the next slide, please, Callum. So this is a bit of a busy slide, which probably you can't read, but you can read. You could read in the packs that you got hopefully from the presentation. I'm not going to go through this in much detail, but it just gives a little bit of detail around how some of the work is going at the moment. So on the left-hand side is all the stuff associated with the North Authority and the move towards creation. And on the left-hand side it's the North, on the right-hand side it's the West. It goes down. The second column in are all the member task and finish groups that are taking place at the moment. So there's about 10 of those in the North, and they're either already in train or will start shortly. And they will obviously make recommendations through ultimately to the North Shadow Executive, which will make decisions about how that formulates forward. So I think the next slide, Callum, if we can, is just a précis of where you can get information from in terms of on the Future Northants website. There's some frequently asked questions on there, video setting out the vision and approach, and also the updated prospectus. And like I say, you've had all the members of, actually all the authorities have had copies of the bigger presentation that was done this time last week. But hopefully those few slides just gives you a bit of context around them, Chair. So I wasn't planning on doing any more than that, but happy to take any questions or formal questions back to the programme office if that's more appropriate.
Thank you for that, Graham. That was really useful. Has anybody got anything they want to ask? Right, That's wonderful, thank you. We're now moving on to item 6. This is Kettering Town Council set-up arrangements. It's quite a detailed report, and I thought the way we would handle this, I hope you all agree, is that as Martin presents this report, we can perhaps pause at each section and have a chat about it before we move on, so that when we get to the recommendations at the end, which is a very long list, we'll have a fairer chance of making some decisions. So anyway, over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. The report's slightly in the wrong order because under normal circumstances, we'd have had the final council decision to make the order to create the town council, which obviously hasn't happened yet, and we're intending to do that in September ordinary council meeting. But given that we've lost a lot of time, I thought it was useful to have the discussion about the component parts of it now in anticipation of council approving the order. Obviously, if they don't, then we'll have to start all over again. There's about 6 sections here, and as Chairman suggested, if we go through each one at a time. If I start with accommodation, clearly the town council is going to have some accommodation, both for meetings, and given there are 20 members of the town council, then a decent sized meeting room is necessary. That's assuming we don't have to socially distance, of course. They'll need some office accommodation, and with the mayor, then they'll need something akin to the current mayor's parlour. So the choices seem to me to be either a part of the existing municipal offices is rented to the town council, in which case there's an obvious choice: the existing mayor's parlour and members' room. The nearby office, which is the one occupied by yourself at the moment, Leader, and then some
It was
ability
the headmistress's office.
Indeed, the headmistress's office, and some ability to use this chamber as well. That's one choice. The other choice is you put them somewhere else in the council's estate. There aren't that many obvious alternatives. Or the third is that you ask the town council to go and find something on the market and rent that. Clearly, whatever you do, there's a rental cost, and that's going to be built into the budget. So really, I wanted members' views about the desirability of allocating a bit of space in these offices in future, as opposed to having them somewhere else. And I think there's pros and cons to it, really, that if the town council continues to sit in the space that the mayor and the borough council occupies at the moment, then there could be some confusion in people's minds about whether that, where the town council starts and stops, and how different it is from the old borough council. Equally, it's a lot easier than going out, finding new premises, fitting it out, novating across the contents of the parlour, furnishing it for a chamber, etc. So those, to me, seem to be the relevant points. I'll hand over to members.
Thank you. Members?
I think Mr. Scrimshaw had his hand up.
I haven't got any sign of that on here.
Yeah, he's just put his hand up.
Up there it is. No, I've got Ian Jelly. I haven't got Mick Scrimshaw showing his hand up. Sorry, Mick, I'm going to start with you, but I'm just telling my technical bod here that this ain't working. Sorry about that. Mick.
Apologies, I forgot how to do it electronically. I'll try and figure it out during the meeting. I hoped you could see me, as there's only a few of us. I agree with Martin's comment that sort of the town can be based in a council's office.
Mick, do you want to switch your screen off and just have voice, because you are really flaky on the signal? We're not getting everything you say. Off you go. Try that again. I believe so, yeah.
Okay, great. I was just saying, Chair, I asked about the potential confusion with the public of the new town council sort of running out of the existing borough council offices. However, it's difficult, isn't it, for us to be taking decisions. Town can exist. So I think very at least initially, possibly for the first 12 months or so, the borough council offices are used, and once the town council is elected, then of course it would be up to them, I guess, to make their own future decision.
Yes, I got that. So what you're saying, Mick, is, if I may paraphrase, that for the first 12 months, stay in the council offices, utilising the council offices, but then after that 12 months, consider another building. Okay, that's useful. I've got Ian Jelly wishing to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My point's exactly, Mick's just said exactly what I was going to say. I think maybe for a temporary situation going forward, you know, the first 12 months, use what we've got. Then obviously they can have a discussion with the new unitary council about the way forward, whether they need to look for new premises or whether the unitary council is prepared to keep them in there. And I understand a bit about the confusion with the public and, you know, mixing it between the old Kettering Borough Council and the new Kettering Town Council. But I, you know, initially the right way forward is do it on a temporary basis and let the unitary and the new town council make the decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Lloyd, Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of laterally thinking about it. If the new town council were to have the mayor's parlour, would they then be able to sublease it for weddings and the like as it is now? Because that would be at least an income stream for them.
Well, yes, that's a potential choice. I suppose that will need a discussion with the Shadow Authority about whether the premises were shared, so that the town council had it for most of the time, but that the unitary authority was able to host weddings there, or whether, as you suggest, it was sublet entirely to the town council and they became the provider of the wedding venue. So that's a discussion to have.
Thank you. Councillor Thurland, Leslie.
Thank you. Talking about that, I mean, if they sublet it, who gets the rental income for weddings? Yeah, and also, will they pay a market rent to the unitary, or do we decide what the rent income's going to be from it? Who makes that decision?
I've assumed that the town council will pay a market rent for the premises. I don't know what that is, but clearly we can calculate that afterwards. Clearly we have to run this decision past the Shadow Authority as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else want to say anything? So is it right if I say that we're in agreement that we think that the new local authority should have accommodation in this building that I'm sitting in for, say, 12 to 18 months, and then they can choose to move on or negotiate something? Is that, could you put your thumbs up if that's what you agree?
Yeah, I think 12 months, Chair, because it then will give them time to rethink. If we say 18 months and they want to change earlier, then they've got the problem of getting out of a lease or rent. So 12 months, I would be happy.
As you were, everybody, do you want to put your thumbs up to 12 months?
I was going to say, Chair, could we say for a indeterminate period, you know, because it won't be down to our decision, it'll be down to the unitary.
Going to be a long night. Right, I've got an amendment to an indeterminate. Put your thumbs up if you want them to have no time limit.
That's
Three.
Wow.
So that falls. So we go back to 12 months. Put your thumbs up if you want them to have the building for 12 months.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah?
I've got 5, Chair. Yes.
Well, I haven't voted.
No, 6.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. So we'll now move on to the assets.
Mayoral assets. So council's already agreed in principle that the mayoral insignia transfers to the town council. And that will clearly need to be insured, securely stored, etc. So that there's some costs you've given the town council. That leaves decisions to be made about the mayoral car, and I suppose by dint of that, the driver. The annual cost of the lease at the moment of the vehicle is just over £5,000. It helpfully or not helpfully, the lease expires on the 31st of March. But we have established that we could extend it if members wished us to. Obviously, there's no point having a car without a driver, so the driver's cost is approximately £11,000, which is essentially a couple of people who do the job effectively in their own time. I suppose, does a town council need a car and a driver is the question we're posing. And clearly, if it does, then that's a cost that would be innovated onto the town council precept.
So over to you. Have you got any views on that? Go on, Mick, you're going to be first again. Do you want to have a view on it?
Thank you. I'm gonna. All things about this, but I just wondered before we start discussion whether to sort of try and put it in this has been done to the.
Yeah, I don't understand.
You can't, Mick, we're finding it extraordinarily difficult to understand what you're saying. I don't know whether. Sorry? Could you use the phone, Mick? No, I don't mean that literally. I meant, could you call, for heaven forfend, I think you can't use a phone, but could you use the phone to call in? Because we're not understanding what you're saying.
I don't know.
Mick, I'm going to move on to Leslie and see if you can sort of switch it all off and start it up again.
As we're going to be a town council and it's going to be presetted for this, I don't think deciding keeping the car and the driver would go down very well in this day and age. We're supposed to be going less carbon neutral, less car usage. So I wouldn't want to see a car and the driver agreed by us. I think if they decide when it comes to the town council itself, but tonight I wouldn't agree to that. Thank you.
Okay, we've made a note of that. Mick, are you?
Still good?
No, it's still working. Mark Rowley, Councillor Rowley. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't think the other town councils in the borough have got cars and drivers. It means that they're just going to be for Kettering. It's not the whole borough. I can't see why they'd need it. I'd be of the opinion of saying no for now and letting them make their own mind up once they're at their sovereign power.
And Mick, can you now see if you've got your IT sorted? Can you hear me, Mick? I don't think he's hearing me.
You're still connecting. Try now.
Hello, Mick? Oh, he's muted on here. Unmute. Can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Off you go.
Right.
Speak quick, because what we've got you.
Really sorry.
It's not working.
Any kind of analysis of the borough mayor, for how much do they spend there in sort of Lesborough, and whether or not the other events that they attend regionally and even nationally, whether they would be still expected to attend as a town council, percent, etc.
Okay, we've captured. I think we've captured what the point you were making, and Martin will now answer that.
Well, I think the honest answer is we don't know. Town councils currently tend to get invited to in-borough events, but not hugely to out-of-borough events. And given when the Unitary Authority is created, that its neighbours will be quite a long way away in terms of Northampton, Peterborough, Cambridgeshire and Leicestershire, then I suspect, given there's probably about a dozen town councils in Northamptonshire when you've finished, you probably wouldn't be inviting them all to events a long way away. I suspect there'd be events within Northants. Now, obviously, I appreciate some parts of Northants are a long way from Kettering, but whether they're frequent enough to justify transport, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Okay. I've got Ian Jelly wishing to speak now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think from the point of view of the other town and parish councils, you know, Town Mayor in Rosswell, for example, they get a small allowance every year which covers the cost of going to any of these events. So they don't have a car or anything, but they are reimbursed for any travel expenses. So I think that initially could be something for the new Kettering Town Council. And then if they decide going forward that they want a car, then it's obviously down to them to fund it and decide to take it forward.
I've got Leslie. Have you put your hand up again?
Yes, yeah, because I didn't hear I don't understand what Mick was suggesting, Martin. Perhaps you could paraphrase, because I didn't hear very little of that. Thank you.
Apologies.
With Mick's permission, I think Mick was saying, were there likely to be a number of events which Kettering's mayor would be invited to, which meant they did, you know, a fair amount of travelling? And my answer was, well, I don't know. But I think they're likely to be within Northants rather than wider.
Yeah, and also I think the mayor, I mean, each mayor, they choose which functions they go to, don't you? So you get the likes of perhaps Councillor Burton that went to 99%, but you get another councillor that would perhaps only go to 5%. So I think that is a personal choice and not one that we should stymie, if you like, by saying, yes, you can have a driver and a car, and then thinking they've got to use it.
I'm going to have a go at this. Mick, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just very quickly, having the debate, I think my opinion is very much that we, as a borough council, should not be taking these financial decisions about the car lease, about the attendant. The mayor of the town council probably could move with expenses and travel allowances, etc.
Martin would like to come back on that point.
I suppose the germane point here is that the lease expires on the 31st of March, so before the town council can get to make a decision. So really, I suppose what I'm asking is whether we should extend the car lease or not. And if we don't, and the town council decides to want a car, it's going to have to source its own car. That's
so if you want the council, the new council, to make its own decisions, which I'm sure we all do, tonight you've got to indicate that you would allow an extension to the motor vehicles lease.
And are we paying for that, or is that going to be on the? Yeah, we'll have to continue paying, won't we?
The town council would pay for that after the
town council
on the preset.
Yeah,
so
yes, we have to build a budget on the basis that cost was in there.
But we're saying we don't want to put anything on the preset for car and driver. Is that right?
Well, you've got a choice. You either say that you want to extend the lease to give them the choice, or you make a decision and allow the car to fall because it comes to the end of its lease on the 31st of March.
Through you, Chair, I think you've got to let the new town council make that decision. I don't think we should make that for them.
Graham Salisbury.
Thanks, Chair. Just to help out, I think the point of principle that Martin's trying to get members to discuss is quite right in the report. I think it's less important in terms of the detail of where this actually goes, because Kettering Borough Council in the first instance will have to set a preset for the new town council for the first year, and we'll have to take a judgment in that around what is the appropriate bits of that budget, and part of it's either going to be for the provision of a car and a driver, or for the provision of motor expenses in the absence of it. So come which way, there's going to be some provision in there for doing things because they need to be able to do their job. So I think if we can just get a steer from you about whether you think the car and the driver is appropriate or not, then we can do the rest.
Okay, so you've all heard that clarification. So what we're talking about is, do we keep the car and the driver and then allow the town council to make its own decisions, or do we not? So hands up those people who want to keep the driver and the car to allow the decision to be taken by the new incoming Kettering Town Council. None of you, right? And therefore you would, all of you agree that the car and the driver goes at the end of this.
On the 31st of March.
Could you show with your hands up? Right. Okay. Well, that was clear. Thank you for that. We're now moving on to the coat of arms.
Thank you, Chairman. This is hopefully relatively more straightforward. When we've discussed this before, I think there was a feeling that we could reattach the old coat of arms, the pre-1974 coat of arms, to the new town council. We have all the bits still, so they can be easily transferred to replace the existing borough's coat of arms. There is a process to go through with the College of Arms, which obviously costs some money. That's set out in 212. Including all the producing of images for letterheads and signage and anything else that they need to produce, we're talking about £6,000. Some of that cost will have to be borne in this financial year, not all of it, but some of it. So I'm checking that members are okay about approaching the College of Arms to re-adopt the old pre-74 coat of arms.
So there you have it. That's your challenge. Has anybody got anything they'd like to say? Ian Jelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to do that and quite happy to propose that going forward.
Clark Mitchell, did you want to say something, Councillor Mitchell?
Unmute.
I was going to say that I would happily propose this because it's cheaper to keep the current coat of arms, or well, the old coat of arms, and so this is a good way forward, and it's the cheapest way forward, and it cuts the cost down.
That's a good point. Has anybody else got anything they want to say? Would you like to put your thumbs up if you want us to get on with that work with the coat of arms?
Sorry, Chair, Mick wants to speak.
Councillor Scrimshaw. Off you go.
Of this very small cost would be borne by the borough council. I see this as very much part of the whole transformation agenda. So I'm not entirely sure why this was by that sort of 44 million transformation fund of moving to unitaries.
Well, try.
I didn't understand that, Chair.
Oh, I did. Do you want to answer that one, Martin, please?
I'll ask. I'm not full of confidence. Ask. I'm not full of confidence that I'll get very far, but I'll ask.
But can we deal with life as it is, Mick? Would you like to do that work for the coat of arms for the new town council? As Clark Mitchell, Councillor Mitchell said, as the cheapest option. Yes, you're saying yes. Can I have a show of thumbs? It's unanimous. Thank you. We now come on to town twinning.
Yes, Chairman. Kettering Town is twinning with Launchstone, with Kettering, Ohio, and now with Falmouth in Jamaica. And we pay small grants to Launchstone and Ohio, and would now be in line to make a grant to any association set up around Falmouth. So I'm suggesting that that is transferred to the town council rather than the unitary, because it's so clearly geographically situated on Kettering. And therefore the town council will need to put a small sum in its budget of about £2,000 approximately to support any twinning work that goes on, as we do now.
So it's another little bit of cash to keep the town twinning going in the short term, and then in the long term, it would be for the new authority to decide what they wanted to do. I've got Leslie wishing to speak.
I think we should go, I mean, some of the other towns are twinned with other people, so I think it should be the same as what they do. And if we pay for them, then we'll pay for this one.
Martin, do you want to just?
Yes, clearly a decision for the unitary will be whether it wants to support any twinning arrangements that it does. You're quite right, at the moment Kettering Borough Council makes a small grant, or has made grants to Desborough, Rothwell and Will Barston in the past, though I don't know, I have to say, unless Anne can tell me any different, I don't know that we've made many payments in recent years to those three twinning associations.
Right, Mark Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's certainly the twinning is with Kettering, so it should stay with the town council. I haven't got a problem with setting aside £2,000 for them for the first year. Then they can, as you said, make their own destiny. If they want to carry them on, then they'd have to fund it. If not, then they can soon stop the twinning.
And Councillor Scrimshaw. Vic.
I suppose we're not twinned with Kettering, Ohio. It's a sister city arrangement. I don't really understand, but it's different. My question though is Falmouth, Jamaica. When did we twin with Falmouth, Jamaica? I know there was a motion passed a year or so ago at full council to try and do that, but I didn't realise we'd actually done it.
Yes, it happened in March. Anne can tell me exactly when it happened. Anne?
I don't know whether you can hear me because my connection's poor.
Yeah.
Yes, it was in March. It was in March, Chair. We're still waiting to receive some artwork back from Jamaica, and then we can get the twinning sister city arrangements documentation prepared for signature. But we're still awaiting that, but it has technically been completed.
Right, there we are. That's what comes of not having as many meetings as we
Well, we were going to announce it at council, but obviously we haven't had council since then, so. Yes.
Okay, has anybody else got any questions or anything they would like to say? Therefore, are you content to go forward with this £2,000 to continue the town twinning so that they continue into the new authority? Show of hands. Mick? Yep, okay, that's unanimous. We're now going on to transfer of assets and functions.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to deal with paragraphs 17 to 20 first before I come back to 16. So largely because you don't have a lot of choice about 17 to 20. The only statutory duty placed on parish councils, town councils, is the provision of allotments. So effectively, you will be transferring the existing allotment sites to the town council. There's a small income from allotments, small net income from allotments, so that will help a little bit. But all the allotments in Kettering are self-managed by either one of three organisations, and I should stress that includes the groundwork allotment as well as the more traditional ones. The neighbourhood plan process, there's one underway in the Headlands, which is drawing to its conclusion. So the town council will inherit the ownership of that neighbourhood plan, assuming it's all approved in a referendum. Also, parish councils have first refusal on whether they should take control of any closed churchyards. The one in Kettering is the one next to the parish church, St Peter and Paul's. That's about £2,500 worth of maintenance cost. They're not required to accept it, and obviously that's a question for the town council when it's created about whether it wants to take ownership of that. I'd be very surprised if there was a rush, but you never know. And apart from markets, there were no other functions or assets that we have considered transferring. And I know from other town councils that are being created around Northamptonshire the decisions made so far are to limit what's provided to the town councils, because that would be to fetter the unitary's decision making about what it wants to delegate or even transfer. So, and I think we've had this discussion earlier, which is that it's best to leave the unitary to make those decisions about how it wants to treat town and parish councils in future, rather than try and assume ahead of that. So the thing that I suppose that we are asking questions for is in relation to the market. The transfer of the market itself, the charter rather, the one from 12 something or other, that will need to be included in the consequential orders that need to go through Parliament, which tidy up a load of items that weren't in the structural change order. That's a piece of work that the County Monitoring Officers Group is looking after at the moment. So the market, our market charter will get referenced in that consequential order. That leaves a question about, well, having handed the market charter to the town council has then got to decide how it wants to manage it. So the first question is, are you prepared to transfer the assets associated with the market, which is essentially a collection of stalls and where they're currently stored? That will enable the town council to at least continue the market where stalls are provided. And the town council could come to an arrangement either with the unitary or with a third party to physically manage the market in terms of putting stalls up and taking them down and taking the money, etc. So there's a small consequence for Desborough in the Desborough market is currently managed by this borough council, and so I've entered into some early discussions with Desborough about whether they want to similarly take responsibility for the market there, but obviously they've not had a chance to consider that yet.
Right, that's quite a lot to take on board. Mick Scrimshaw.
Yep, you sort of keep asking questions. You use the example though, if the town council ends up doing jobs that the borough council currently does, is there not an argument for funding to come from the new unitary? I appreciate that not to do a discussion this evening, but are the place as part of the hang on, is it aggregation? Yes, aggregation discussion.
I think we got the question. Yeah. Here's the answer.
I suppose the market has in times past made a profit and in times past made a loss. So currently it's we're not charging rent at all. So at the moment it's a cost to the unitary. But it could equally be a source of income for the town council if they managed it differently. So I think it's a moot point about whether you're passing an asset or a liability over. Yes.
Anybody else? Oh, Leslie.
Yeah. What I got 2 or 3 questions. What happens to the graveyard if we don't take it on? Who looks after it? Does it stay with the unitary? If they take the market on, can they then change the site of it? Can they put it back on the marketplace if they want to? And what Councillor Scrimshaw was saying about who's going to pay for this, it's always a case of he who pays the piper calls the tune. So if the unitary pay, does that then mean they have a say in what goes on in something that's really historically been part of Kettering Town Centre? I would have thought we wanted it to be unilaterally Kettering Town's in Kettering Town's ownership.
Okay, so the first question was about the closed churchyard. So if the town council doesn't want to take it on, then the unitary has no choice but to maintain it. The second question was about if they move the market, if they take management of the market, can they move it? Well, I suppose it would depend on the land ownership of the place they were moving it to. So you mentioned the marketplace. I'm assuming that site would stay in the ownership of the unitary. So they'd have to have a discussion with the unitary about moving the market, let alone the discussions you want to have with the market traders anyway. And then the third point, which is if the unitary was to provide some form of financial arrangement, would they have some say? Well, it depends a bit about the arrangement, but yes, potentially they could.
I think Mick made if I may,
Yeah, sure.
Mick made a fundamental point of if there's some work expected to be done, cascaded down to the new town council, would there be any budget going with it?
And I think that at the moment it's currently making a loss, but it has made a profit in the past. So it doesn't automatically follow that you would necessarily transfer any money. You may decide to do that, but you might decide not to.
Graham would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as Martin said, what we're trying to do here is deal with specific things that need to be covered in the sort of consequential order. And if markets is one that members think should be provided by the town council, then we'd have to think a bit more about what that meant. And if there's two ways of doing it, either if there's going to be an income or an expenditure, we'll either need to reflect that in the budget that we've got to do for the town council, or there'll need to be further dialogue about whether there's some sort of financial provision from the new unitary into that, even if it's for a temporary period of time. The bigger issue for me is the dialogue that will take place subsequently with the Northamptonshire Authority, with the different towns and parishes, not just Kettering Town, but the other ones that have been established. There would have to be agreements if the town council or town councils wanted to take on services. It has to be done by agreement, it can't be done by imposition. And what comes with that is either an agreed funding source or some other mechanism to make it work. And that it kind of comes to Leslie's point that it's either things are either being transferred over and then the town council would take responsibility and it has to ride it roughly the smooth, really. It might make some money, it might lose some money, that's the risk it's taking. Or it's done under a different arrangement whereby it's done under not a transfer but a service provision agreement where there might be some funding that goes with it. But with that, you don't get as much control. But there are different ways that we can do this. Well, not we.
Not sure.
Going forward.
Thank you for that, Graham. That was incredibly useful.
Chair, could I ask that on Graham's point? If we made a decision tonight on it, or a recommendation, could that then be changed when the town council's allocated? But then if they don't want it, are the unitary under an obligation to take it back? I'm worried about it falling down where we want something that's always been known as Kettering as a market town.
Let me get you some clarification from Martin on that.
I think you've got a stage decision to make here, but the decision that council's already made in principle is that the market charter should transfer to the town council. You can obviously undo that decision at the September council if you wish to, in which case the market charter would transfer to the unitary authority. If you decided to transfer the charter to the town council, then the second consideration is whether the town council are just ceremoniously holding the charter and market management remains with the unitary. I think you're probably setting up a bit of a conflict if you do that, because the holder of the charter is the one who decides what the market does in future. And yes, because the charter goes back 700, 800 years nearly, and it is associated with Kettering, then it felt, I think that's why the council were happy for it to transfer to the town council, because it stayed in the geography it's always been in. So as Graham said earlier, the town council takes a risk in running a market that it makes a profit or it makes a loss. The same risk that you've taken as Borough Council, and presumably the councils have taken for 800 years. So it's a small risk. It's not an expensive business, even now with nil rent. It's not costing a fortune. And it may be that the town council wants to do something differently with the market, within the confines of the charter, obviously. Does that help?
Has anybody got anything they want to add? I'm not sure I know what we're going to actually decide on.
Perhaps, given the debate, maybe members just confirm whether or not they want to stick with the original decision in principle that the charter transfers to the town council.
Yes, do you want to transfer the 800-year-old charter to the town council? Let's start with that. And those against? Those abstaining? Don't think Mick's hearing me, actually, to be truthful. So that's most people have agreed that.
And then the second is whether you want to transfer all the paraphernalia that goes to the market, which thereby implying that the town council is running the market, even if it employs the third party.
Now that you've transferred that over, do you want to give the new town council the job of running these allotments and yes?
No, but just the market charter.
Just the market. Yeah, that's 4. That's unanimous.
Okay, right.
Does that
Thank you.
help?
That's great. Thank you.
Interim clerk.
Yes, Chairman, I think there's quite a lot of work to be done to set the town council up, just in terms of the administrative arrangements, but also in terms of allowing that first meeting to go ahead. I've already produced quite a long list of decisions that first meeting the town council has got to make. So the suggestion is that we appoint an interim clerk, that the Borough Council does that at the moment, that person is in place for a few months from March to July, enables the council to have its first meeting and take those first decisions. And then the town council can decide what sort of level of support they need thereafter. As a guide price, we've taken the salaries of the 3 A6 town clerks and just prorated it over that period. And that's why we've ended up with a figure of about 7,000. As we've taken the hourly rate effectively for those 3 town clerks.
Right.
And so that's a cost that will a small part of that will fall on the Borough Council until April the 1st, and then mostly on the town council thereafter.
Okay. Mark Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. From experience, trying to at the town council trying to find their own clerk is going to be a massively difficult task. There are so many parish councils without clerks, or clerks are have resigned and waiting for replacements, that I think we've got to provide them with someone with experience to guide them through the creation. We can't just leave them loose. So I'd fully support us providing an interim clerk.
Thank you. And then Mick Scrimshaw.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, more because this cost will be before the town council actually exists. So we answered right at the
That was a yes. Good. Sorry, Mick, but it is incredibly difficult to understand what you're saying. But we've got the gist that you're...
No problem. My question was answered. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, right. Thank you. Leslie.
Yeah. So the cost for those 3 months, that's coming out of our money. We're voting to put the money in, or it's coming from the preset. And how are you going to get this clerk? Is it going to go out to interview, or is it somebody we're going to give them, or are we, is it going to be the normal applications for the job?
I haven't thought it in very great detail, but I was expecting that we'd advertise within the community of interest that we might have. So within the council, within the town and parish clerks who are out there, through NALC. So we use the mechanisms, and it may be
it'll be a public, interview going out to the public rather than somebody within a council worker.
Yeah, so for a 3-4 month job, we're going to limit the number of applicants. So we'll have to work out the best way of getting the message out there. Yeah. And sorry, you had another question, Leslie, which was how much is it being paid for by most of the cost will be covered by the precept. A small part of it will be covered by us.
Yeah, because I would presume if they're looking at it long term, yes, this job might only be for 3 months, but they would hope if they're doing a good job, the new town council will keep them on.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yep. Councillor Jelly, Ian Jelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Rowley. You know, it's important we have a very good clerk, qualified clerk from the outset to steer the new town council in the right direction. I know they're very difficult to find at this moment in time, but if we can get somebody who's good quality and knows what they're doing, I think it would be a great asset for the new town council going forward.
Right, well, we've gone through that report item by item, and I believe that we have covered everything in the recommendation. So you've indicated as you've gone through.
We've got the answers. Thank you.
Has anybody got anything else they want to add? Mark Rowley.
Sorry, Chair, we haven't voted on the last one, the interim clerk.
You're absolutely right. I was getting ahead of myself. So are we content that we're going to provide this clerk? Show of hands. Right, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. We now come on to item 7, calendar of meetings September 2020 onwards. And I believe Martin is going to speak to this.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, we've had both the impact of the pandemic and the final year of the organisation to somehow manage here. And as my report says, the pressure on members and the officers who support committee meetings is going to be moving towards the unitary authority setup. So that will limit the amount of space there is for KBC meetings. But of course, a lot of the forward planning for KBC meetings won't be needed anymore. So on that basis, we've prepared a calendar of meetings which carries on the day-to-day functionality of the council, but doesn't do any of the forward planning, or very little of it, because that will start to fall away quite quickly after the autumn. So as you can see from the proposal, there are some bodies we're suggesting have ceased to meet. We don't have any more task and finish groups, but that other committees will have to continue to meet to do the day-to-day business. And I would like to add, Mr. Chairman, if I might, an additional meeting in for Monitoring and Audit Committee. We're going to suggest the 16th of September, simply because the amount of stuff they've got to get through is reasonably significant between now and Christmas.
So that's the 16th of September for monitoring
and audit, an additional one. So those are the suggestions, Mr. Chairman. I think happy for members to ask questions.
Okay, Mark Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. The tenants forum's missing.
No, it's not. It's on the next page.
Was it?
Yeah, it's on the
All
other
right. Sorry.
turnover, and
Yeah,
I believe that's statutory.
It is, yes.
that's why I raised it.
Right. Anybody else with anything they want to say? Are you content with this report? That's unanimous.
Thank you. Are you happy for me to circulate it ahead of September Council?
Yes.
Council?
May we circulate it ahead of September Council, please? Yes, they are.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think that concludes the business. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks for your input. It made it quite an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say thank you, Callum, for your first time as committee managers? Very, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Callum.
Brilliantly.
Thank you, everyone.
Mick, we need